Today I'm going to demonstrate some recording on this Tascam 246. This unit came in to me for a service, and when I received it, it was jammed into its case with a tennis ball. So I was kidding on to the guy that owns it that I was going to cover Anyone for Tennis by Cream, and because I'm a whimsical bugger, I've decided, yeah, I will cover that. Before I get into it, let's just talk about the way we're going to be using the mixer here. This has got a very comprehensive mixer. I think it can maybe be a little bit intimidating for somebody who isn't used to mixer technology. A few things to remember here. This section here, which has 6 channels, is separate from this section here, which is a tape machine, which has 4 tracks. And then there's this little sub-mixer here. The faders, we usually want to have them sitting in this greyed out area between 7 and 8. Things where you've got faders at all different levels like this is really a mix down thing. For tracking, probably your faders are going to look like this, and these switches at the top are either going to be to the left for a line input or microphone input or turned off. And then we're going to be setting the levels using these controls here. Sometimes you'll move the fader a little bit just to get a slightly finer grade of control over the gain than you would do from this pot on its own. But mostly these are going to stay here. The other thing to know is that the position of the pan controls is important. The way the routing works in this, you can assign any of these 6 mixer channels to any one of 4 buses. But these buses then pass through a left and right bus. Assignments 1 and 3 must go to the left bus, and assignments 2 and 4 must go to the right bus. So what this means is, for instance, say I've got a guitar in this channel here, and I push down number 1 and arm number 1, but I turn that pan control to the right, I'm not going to get a recording. It must be turned fully left. If it's halfway left, then I'm going to get half the signal going through to number 1. Which is passing through the leftmost of these 2 faders before it hits the tape machine. And the reason it works like that is so that you can use 2 tracks on the tape player to create a stereo image. So say I have 2 microphones on a stereo source, say it's a piano, so I've got one microphone up at near the high keys and another microphone down by the low keys, so that when I'm playing higher up it appears on the right hand side of the stereo image, and when I'm playing low down on the keyboard it appears on the left hand side of the stereo image. Then what I can do is assign both tracks to 1 and 2, and I can pan the leftmost microphone to the left and pan the rightmost microphone to the right. And then how wide I set these pan controls creates the width of the stereo image as it seems to you when you're listening to headphones or sitting between stereo speakers. And in that case I would record onto 2 tracks. So that's why it's organised like that. On later models we have a direct mode in Porter Studios where channel 1 of the mixer goes directly to track 1 of the tape player, and we don't have this on the 246. We're going to be setting the levels between what we're playing and what we're hearing back coming back from the tape player using this section, the monitor section. With these positions up here, remix on the mixer, then we can set the levels using the faders. And the reason I only use the mixer in that way during mixdown is because this is also how we achieve ping-pong recording. So if you end up doing something like this, oh yeah, that sounds good in my headphones while I'm tracking my guitar, there's a chance that depending on how you've got all these arm switches, these assign switches and pan control set up, that you're going to end up sort of bouncing part of your recording when you didn't mean to. So I think it's just better practice to do all the monitoring when we're recording with this section. Now, the slightly confusing thing here is if we have this button here that says Cue Program, if that is pushed in and that LED is red, then this ends up being a kind of sub-mixer from the inputs. For recording, we want that to be off. Then what that means is if bus 1 is armed, then we hear the input on this rotary control number 1 in this monitor section. But if it's not armed, then that rotary control is allowing us to monitor the tape level for track 1. So if I've done this, 3 and 4 are armed, I'm going to hear whichever of these 6 inputs are assigned to buses 3 and 4, but then 1 and 2 are going to control what's coming back from tracks 1 and 2 in the tape player. I'll talk about this as I go on, but I just thought because it's a slightly more complex mixer than some of the units that I'm covering on this channel, I would do an introductory talk. So the first part of Anyone for Tennis that I'm going to be recording is a substitute for Ginger Baker's bongo parts. And I'm using my Vocadrum. This is the pattern I've got set up. So it's a single 16-step pattern. I've got probability and choke group set up on the Vocadrum and some modulation values that are a slightly different length than the overall length of the pattern. So due to a combination of those factors, it's not going to be exact repetition all the way through, but what I'll also do is use that step jump feature. That'll add in some more variety. It'll sound more like somebody who's just kind of improvising a take. The way that this is all set up, the cable here is coming out of the headphone jack, so we've got a stereo 1/4" jack at one end of the cable, and then at the other end it terminates in two RCA sockets, and one of them I've got an RCA to 1/4" adapter, and that's going into input 1 on the front of the 246. The way the 246 works, it doesn't have XLR inputs. The way the inputs are arranged electronically, if you turn this trim pot all the way down to line level, then that'll give you a line level signal with the fader in the 7/8 region, or you can turn it up a bit. Like I've got this, if you look at the meter here, you can see the body of the sound is averaging maybe around -5 decibels, but peak light's coming on quite a lot, so some of those transients are a lot louder. They'll saturate onto tape. The sound that you're hearing, by the way, is monitors off screen. They're being picked up by the internal microphone on my camera, which is also my phone. Those speakers are hooked up to the monitor out, so what you're hearing is this section here. So if I continue to play there, again, I'm making the point that this fader here is just ensuring unity gain. I'm not using the faders here to change the level. I'm just setting it such that it's not adding or subtracting any gain to what this trim control is doing to the sound. And you can see that I've done a little bit of fiddling with the EQ. I'm basically taking some of the resonance out of the tom-like sounds and some of the abrasive quality out of the more high-end sizzly, snarey sort of sounds there. So I'm panned all the way to the left. A sign for this mixer channel is depressed. Record function for bus 1 is on. The corresponding master fader, which for bus 1 is going to be the left bus, is up in unity gain as well. So next I can get my tape in. I'm going to be recording it at 3 3/4 inches per second, which is the higher of the two speeds. If you don't know, the speed control is in here where my finger is pointing. You probably can't see because of the camera angle. I just reached round to the switch at the back and turned on DBX. You could leave it off. I'm going to be recording quite hot, so I probably wouldn't get terrible amounts of hiss without it, but I'm on the side of the argument that likes DBX. I know some people don't like the way that it turns down the high end, but in my mind that's a mid and low end boost that sounds good, and you get more dynamic range. So if I press pause and record, the song that I've decided to demo using the 246 doesn't actually involve any live drum kit, and for that reason there's a few capabilities of this mixer and this routing system that I'm not going to be able to demonstrate. So I thought I'd just talk through a few scenarios involving my drum kits and my microphones that might give you some ideas about other ways that you could use this mixer. So, scenario 1, let's imagine we've got 3 microphones. We can see that I've got one microphone here on the kick drum, and another one here in the snare, and then this position here, which sometimes I think it's called the Bockwurst or Dick Mick position. But the idea is you get a spot signal from your kick drum mic and a spot signal from your snare drum mic, and then you kind of blend it all together. This microphone that's at the kind of groin area, sort of in the centre of the kit, acts almost like a room mic. And if you position it right, you can get a sort of blend of all the different signals there. So let's say this is coming into tracks 1, 2 and 3 respectively. What we can do is arm tracks 1, 2 and 3 with the left arm depressed and none of these other buttons depressed. Turn these all to the left. Set up our EQ and our gain level however we want, and only set record enabled on this track. And what that will do is create a blend of all 3 microphone signals from these 3 desk channels going on to track 1 of the cassette player, and that would still leave us with tracks 2, 3 and 4 of the cassette open to do anything we liked, dub, bass, guitar, vocals, something like that over the top. Second way we might think about miking up a drum kit with a limited number of microphones going into the Tascam 246 is, say we've got spot mics and a pair of overheads or room mics. So in my case, got this microphone on the snare. There's a clip for a microphone on this rack tom. It doesn't actually have a microphone in it just now. I'm in the process of acquiring some more microphones and preamps and stuff. And then you've got another spot mic on the floor tom and a microphone on your kick drum. Then in addition to those, you've got, maybe it's overheads, maybe it's room mics. In my case, I've got 2 pressure zone microphones mounted to the wall. So your room mics, overhead mics, whatever, you're trying to get an overall stereo image from these, and then these microphones, you could place them however you liked. I'd probably put the kick dead center, snare just over to the left. I tend to be mixing from the drummer's perspective as opposed to from the listener's. The rack tom would go pretty much dead center as well, or very slightly to the left, and then your floor tom would be way over the other side of the stereo image. How does that translate onto the mixer then? Well, let's say this is your kick drum, we'll put that dead center. And then this would be the snare, so that's going to be a little bit left. Here's your rack tom. Maybe to get more of a spread out of drum rolls and so on, we might put it that side of stereo, although it probably wouldn't agree with the stereo image from the overhead mic, so maybe it just goes there. And then the floor tom would be a lot more further over to the right. And then the overhead mics would be panned hard left and right to make as wide a stereo image as possible. I mean, obviously you could do it a little bit narrower like that. Ideally, one person would sit with headphones on and listen to what's coming through the mixer and make those sort of judgment calls while someone else plays the drum kit. Or maybe if you're doing it on your own, then you would make a couple of test recordings and experiment with the width of this stereo image. So anyway, that would mean you're using all 6 channels of the mixer. And then we want to place all 6 of those channel signals onto 2 tracks of the tape. So here I'm thinking it's going to be tracks 1 and 2 of the tape. So 1 and 2 are depressed on all 6 channels, and then we would arm tracks 1 and 2. Now it doesn't have to be 1 and 2. In fact, we could do 3 and 4 instead. We could actually do 1 and 4, that would be left and that would be right, or we could do 2 and 3. That would be right, that would be left. The only combinations that aren't going to work, if you record on tracks 1 and 3 simultaneously, both of those tape tracks are linked to the left bus, and if you do 2 and 4 simultaneously, they're both going on the right bus. So 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, 1 and 4 together, 2 and 3 together, any of those pairs will create a stereo image, and then you can use the remaining 2 tape tracks to overdub on top of that. Okay, that's me finished the take and rewinding back to the beginning. Bus 1 is now disarmed, meaning that monitor control 1 is changing the level of what's on tape. So if I pause it, you can hear that's controlling the cassette player. Sounding alright to me, so I'm going to move on and record some bass. Bass in this case is going to be my Novation Mini Nova synthesizer. Okay, here's my little Mini Nova synth. So I'm coming out with the mono output of this into channel 2. Actually, I could use any of the 6 mixer channels as long as they were panned to the right with the bus assigned to right/2. You're not restricted to only recording onto track 2 of the tape player from channel 2 of the mixer, but just for convention's sake I am doing it that way. Little thing to notice, you'll probably see this light on. I wanted to record over this tape really fast, so I turned the pitch control all the way up, and I recorded the drums that way. So now it's painfully slow if I turn that pitch wheel off. So I'm stuck like that now. Never mind. So because bus 2 is armed, I can hear the synth coming through the monitor output. If I just turn this slightly, see how this control is controlling the level relative to what's coming back from track 1 of the cassette. If I disarm that, I can't hear the synth anymore. Anyway, I'll go off screen and go for a take. I think I had a pretty satisfactory first take, so I rewound back to 0 on the counter, stopping automatically because I've got 0 return set to stop. Because bus 2 is disarmed, this control is now giving me playback from the tape player, so it's going to come in after 2 bars. There we go. I'm not going to bother listening back to that all the way. Let's move on to guitar. Going through this Joyo AC tone, it's meant to sound a bit like a Vox amp, and then this TC Electronic Third Dimension, which I believe is a copy of some sort of vintage analog Boss delay, which changes hands for big money, but this is actually quite a cheap pedal. Got this kind of Susie and the Banshee sort of sound going on. I'm probably going to process this and the toms and the bass through reverb when I bounce down all 3 of these tracks onto track 4 of the cassette player, because I need another 3 tracks to do the overdub of the things that sound like strings and flute and vocals on the original recording, though I'm going for a more kind of weird electro psychedelic interpretation thereof. Anyway, the cable's going to input 3. Like I say, you could actually plug into any of these the way the assignment works, but you can see it's panned hard left. A sign for bus 3 is depressed. Bus 3 is armed. All the figures are at unity gain. Now got this turned up a little bit, bass down a bit, the drums up a bit, so I've got a good balance for me to do some tracking. So I rewind back to the beginning, then I will do a take. Okay, so turn down the drive a bit, tune my guitar because it was a bit out of tune in the first take, pared down the rhythm that I was playing a little bit, it was a bit busy. So I'm happy enough with that. It's all sounding a bit dry. I'm going to collapse all of them, ping-pong record all of them on track 4, but at the same time as I'm doing that, I'm also going to add some reverb, maybe some echo as well on channels 5 and 6. So really I'm going to be bouncing 5 signals onto track 4. That's the 3 dry signals and 2 wet signals. A blend of these 3 via these knobs to this channel, and a blend of these 3 via these 3 knobs to this channel, and all of that's going on to track 4. And then I can record over tracks 1, 2, 3 with vocoded vocals and synthesized strings and flute substitutes. And I think there's an electric guitar line in there. I'll probably do some sort of horrible robotic fuzz. Okay, so I experimented with having a second send effect on the bass, but it didn't sound good. So all I've got is effect 1 output going into the input with this line 6M9 Stompbox modeler, and then the output's coming into the line input of channel 5. And you can see that channels 1, 2 and 3, the mixer in remix mode, so the signal from the tape is going through these. Now they're all assigned to left right, so I can listen to them on speakers through the main program out. But the important thing is that they're assigned to bus 4, and that bus 4 is armed. Also, the return channel for the effect is assigned to left right, so I can hear it through the program out, but also assigned to track 4. Now, note that if I was recording on tracks 1 and 2, the fact that I've got them assigned to left and right and coming out the speakers would mean that I would potentially record what was coming through the mixer, but because I'm only recording to channel 4, then it doesn't matter. So if I just press play, that's the blend of the 3 instruments without the reverb. And so that's too much, but better there. Situations like that, I normally make it a little bit wetter than I think, because once you start dubbing other stuff on top, that starts to obscure the reverb tail. It ends up sounding drier. So rewind to the beginning of the music and record, then all that material is going to be dumped onto track 4, including the reverb from channel 5, and then I can start to overwrite the material on tracks 1, 2 and 3. Bounce is underway. You can see that meter number 4 is showing the level to tape. So I'm getting very occasional peaks, catching just some of the transients of the drum machine. So I might get extra smack on that and playback, but it's not doing anything else too wild. Okay, everything's on fader 4 now. I can pan that wherever I want. It's probably going to sit in the centre of the mix. I'll go for the vocal part next, which is going to be a vocoder on this Mini Nova again. So that's the recorded vocoder. See, I applied a little bit of EQ. The good thing about this button is that I can switch between I can hear the effect of applying EQ to it compared to that's now coming through that control and there's no EQ on it. So one of the reasons that's important, you can hear it's a little bit congested sounding still, but the first take I did, I was using that as a sort of A-B. In fact, if I just rewind a little bit, I'll show you. Right, so say that's no EQ, more EQ because it's going through these EQ controls. No EQ, EQ. I mean, actually, in this case, it's going through the EQ twice because I was tracking with EQ, but you can use that as an A-B comparison and kind of go, all right, what would it sound like if I redid it passing through the EQ? Because, you know, I was trying to talk and play the keyboard and I haven't memorized the lyrics. The lyrics are on a sheet somewhere. So I was trying to do too much stuff at once to actually concentrate on the sound. So that gives me a way to think about EQ. Anyway, I'm happy enough with that. I can do more to this during mixdown to make it sound less congested, so I think the next stop will be get the part that sounds a bit like a flute. Got another sound here on this little Yamaha DX. It's one of the presets, but that's what I'm using instead of the strings for the string part. So we're going into input 3, could be any input, but you can see it's panned left, assigned to bus 3 is armed. Faders are at unity gain. It's a line level synth, so the trim's turned down. I'm still monitoring through this. Now we'll go for a take. first part overdub. I'll obviously need to rehearse it, but there's this sort of descending minor pentatonic thing that's a sort of cashmere sounding string part. I'm just using another preset in this. Quite a nice sort of light preset in contrast to all the studs that I've got on the tape machine at the moment. Don't have any tracks free, but that happens to arrive at the part of the arrangement where there's no vocals, so this will be going into channel 1. Set this up so it's going to bus 1, arm bus 1, set that to mic line input. I assume that the EQ is going to be flat. That'll probably be the last step I take before I mix.